Alright, today we're talking about baseball in Australia and New Zealand. I already did a video about the Australian Baseball League, which also includes New Zealand, and I plan on doing an ABL season preview before their season gets started, just like I did last year. So I won't talk much about professional baseball in these two countries today. Here I'd like to talk about the history of the game over there, how it's growing in the present day, the success of the national teams and individual players, and what we can expect from them in the future. The first reports of baseball being played in Australia go back to 1857. The game was brought over by American gold miners during the Victorian Gold Rush. At first played by the American miners in their spare time, it was later picked up by cricketers, and in the following decades spread from Victoria to the rest of the country. The first recorded club matches took place in 1875, and the number of clubs grew during the 1870s and 80s. In 1888, Albert Spalding's World Tour paid a visit to Australia, as the Chicago White Stockings and another team of U.S. All-Stars played 3 games at the Sydney Cricket Ground. By 1890, they had their first competition between states when Victoria took on neighboring South Australia. From these two states, an all-Australian team was formed that toured the United States and later the UK. All of this occurred in the 19th century, which means that baseball was further ahead in Australia than it was in almost every other country of the world at the time. Next door in New Zealand, there was no gold rush, so no major influx of Americans to bring baseball to the islands. The Spalding Tour did make a stop there, and that was probably their first introduction to the game. Baseball continued to be played in New Zealand from then on, but didn't see the kind of progress seen in Australia. The population was very small in New Zealand at the time, and the people there already had several other sports to choose from. And travel between Australia and New Zealand was a lot more difficult then, so it would have been really hard to form clubs and competitions there. Australia's first true national championship was held in 1910, when 3 state teams met in Hobart, Tasmania. More championships like this would follow, with more states competing. In 1934, Norman Claxton, previously a member of the South Australia baseball and cricket teams, donated a shield to be given to the champion team as an award, and from there this became an annual tradition, where the shield is given to the top team in Australia. Despite his wishes not to have the award named after him, it came to be known as the Claxton Shield. The tournament to determine the winner of this trophy was also known as the Claxton Shield. This was Australia's premier baseball tournament until 1988. 1989 was the inaugural season of the Australian Baseball League, the country's first attempt at organized professional baseball. Played in the Australian summer, winter in the Northern Hemisphere, among 6 to 9 teams, schedule ranging from 42 to 62 games, the Claxton Shield was awarded to the ABL champions. In the 90s, the league was starting to attract decent-sized crowds, but not enough to cover the costs, and they had a hard time attracting sponsors. By the end of the 90s, the league was bringing in $4 million a year, while the cost of running it was $6 million. So in 1999, the ABL and the Claxton Shield were sold by the Australian Baseball Federation to Dave Nilsson, who in that same year was an MLB All-Star selection, in his final year with the Milwaukee Brewers. Nilsson went on to form the International Baseball League of Australia and awarded the Claxton Shield to its champion. But the league was short-lived. Plagued by a series of problems, it folded in 2002, and Nilsson sold the rights back to the Australian Baseball Federation. In 2010, the ABL was relaunched and has been going ever since. At first, Major League Baseball owned 75% of the league, while the Australian Baseball Federation owned the other 25%. But since 2016, the ABF has been the sole owner, and the league is doing quite well. Attendance is in the hundreds or thousands, up to 5,000 for playoff games. In 2018, the league expanded from 6 to 8 teams. One of the expansion teams was the Auckland Tuatara, New Zealand's first professional baseball team. In the second half of the 20th century in New Zealand, softball, not baseball, became the biggest bat and ball alternative to cricket. The New Zealand men's softball team is the most successful nation at the World Championships, having won it all 8 times. The women's softball team is also very successful. So that is one obstacle baseball in New Zealand has had. But the Auckland Tuatara have been shown a lot of support, and it's getting the locals into baseball, even if they still prefer softball. The ABL is a popular destination for minor league prospects to work on their game during the northern winter. This has been great for the local players, getting to play with and against rising stars from the major league system, and raise the level of play in their country. The Australian national team has been really successful in international competition. The amazing thing about that is, baseball isn't even one of their top sports, but they're just good at it. Currently they're ranked 7th in the world, just behind Dominican Republic. They've participated in the Olympics 3 times, including the 2004 Athens Games where they won the silver. They've been in every edition of the World Baseball Classic. In the 2009 WBC, they shocked everyone by beating Mexico by 10 runs, then almost upsetting Cuba. In the 2017 WBC, they were 9th in the final standings, their highest finish out of all the tournaments. In 2019, they made their debut at the Premier 12, placing 6th. The New Zealand national team has never played in the Olympics, WBC, or Premier 12. They took part in the 2013 WBC qualifier, beating Thailand and the Philippines, but were no match for Chinese Taipei, getting blown out by them twice. They returned for the 2017 qualifiers, where they picked up a win over the Philippines, but lost twice to South Africa. Presently, they are ranked 47th in the world. Perhaps a better measure of Australia's success in baseball is the number of Aussies who've made it into Major League Baseball. 33 players born in Australia have reached the Major League level. 3 additional Major League players were raised in Australia but were born elsewhere. Most of them were pitchers, but several position players have made their way to the big leagues as well. 3 of them were All-Stars. David Nilsson, whom I already mentioned, was an All-Star catcher for the Milwaukee Brewers in 1999. From 92 to 99, he hit over 100 home runs with a career .284 average. Grant Balfour was a Major League reliever from 2001 to 2015 for 5 different teams, collecting 84 saves and posting a .349 career ERA. In 2013, he was an All-Star selection for the Oakland A's. Then there's Liam Hendricks, a 2-time All-Star selection in 2019 and this year, 2021. Last year, he was the American League Reliever of the Year. This year, he's appeared in over 50 games and earned nearly 30 saves in his 11th Major League season. New Zealand is still waiting for its first Major League player. Infielder Scott Campbell played in the minors from 2006 to 2012, reaching the AAA level in the Toronto Blue Jays system. Another infielder, Travis Wilson, spent 8 years in the Atlanta Braves system, mostly at the AAA level, where he hit quite well, but was never given a chance at the top level. Interestingly, Wilson started his career with the New Zealand national softball team, and that's where he returned to when his baseball career ended. Daniel Lamb Hunt is another softball crossover. He didn't start playing baseball until he was 17. He was signed by the Braves but was released before he ever took the field. He's best known for becoming the first Kiwi to play in the Australian Baseball League, where he's had some success. He's also done well in the German League and is now a dual citizen over there. The biggest success stories in Australian baseball may be yet to come. In the last 20 years, youth baseball participation has increased dramatically. Little League affiliated baseball didn't begin there until 2007. In 2013, the Australian champion was granted automatic entry. In 2014, a team from Australia picked up their first win in Williamsport. Today, Australia has the largest Little League participation outside of the United States. In 2018, the number was around 14,000, and that number has been growing every year. New Zealand has also seen gains, though much smaller gains, in youth participation. Little League can be found in their 2 major cities, Auckland and Wellington. If New Zealand is going to get better at baseball, their best bet is to integrate more with Australia. New Zealand has a population of just 5 million and an already crowded sports market. They're not going to get tens of thousands of kids playing baseball, so they'll have to make the best with what players they have. Getting their players over to Australia for more training and participate in more competitions once freer travel becomes possible. That's one advantage they have, is a stronger neighbor that they can latch onto. And I know I've spent most of the time here talking about Australia and only a little about New Zealand. If I did a video solely about New Zealand, it would either be really short or half of it would be about softball. I think they can be good at baseball though, and the future of it will definitely be tied in with their neighbor. As for Australia, everything is going in the right direction there. Even if the rise in youth participation levels off soon, the country's baseball program will still be in good shape. Not sure how well the explosion in youth baseball will translate to adult baseball. It would be great to see more Aussies in MLB, as well as thousands of fans at every ABL game, but we'll just have to wait and see where it leads to. They've seen their share of large baseball events in the past. The first of them was on December 1st, 1956, as a demonstration sport at the Olympics, held in Melbourne that year. Taking place at the Melbourne Cricket Ground, it attracted an audience of 104,000, a record crowd for a baseball game in Australia. The Olympics returned to Australia when Sydney hosted the Games in 2000, by which time baseball was a medal sport, and Australia was one of the countries competing. MLB opened its 2014 season with a pair of games between the Arizona Diamondbacks and the LA Dodgers at the Sydney Cricket Ground, in front of 2 sold-out crowds. Blacktown Baseball Stadium in Sydney hosted a 2017 WBC qualifier, which Australia won. It's unlikely that Australia will ever host a round of the actual WBC, since there are no other baseball countries within reasonable travel distance. And they probably won't host another qualifier since, with the new expanded format, Australia likely won't have to participate in one. New Zealand could be, since they've become a regular in the qualifiers. MLB has expressed some interest in holding another series in Australia, but they haven't talked about it much lately. If interest in baseball continues to grow there, MLB will eventually return someday. As for the Olympics, Brisbane was just recently awarded the 2032 Summer Games. After baseball, softball inevitably return for the 2028 games in Los Angeles, I would be surprised if they did not keep it on the program for 2032. The hometown Brisbane Bandits of the ABL play at Holloway Field. That only seats 1,500, so it would probably need to be expanded for Olympic use. Or they could use the Bandits' old field, Brisbane Showgrounds, which seats 25,000. If not, they could always build a new ballpark for the games. In a lot of countries that might seem like a waste of money because they would have no use for it afterwards. But these days in Australia, there seems to be plenty you can do with a new baseball stadium. Anyway, that's all for this one. Until next time, this is Baseball International. See ya.